Oh, I think I'm gonna go insane. That is my 2026 New Year's resolution, is I would like to go insane. Maybe that will, I don't know, make things easier somehow. So, as you probably noticed, I haven't made a video in a really long time, and I'm very sorry about that. And that is because I simply have not had any time to whatsoever. I've not been able to for the last few months. And so this is going to be kind of a long, rambly video. I'm sorry. There's not really an agenda here today. I'm just going to kind of talk about stuff that happened in my life. So, hopefully it is still interesting to you. Basically, the biggest thing that happened is that we got a notice in late October that we were going to be evicted, is maybe not the right word. We were not going to have our leasing agreement renewed. And we knew this was coming. So basically, the way that it worked is that, we moved into this house, and the landlord was always very clear that she would like to move back into this house eventually when she felt like doing so, because she very much liked the house. It was her house. She was living abroad for a while, and she was planning on coming back to the house when she moved back to the UK. Well, it happened. Basically they gave us a 3-month notice saying, hey, end of January, when your current lease expires, we are going to not renew because she wants to move back in. Well, that's great. Honestly, we were kind of planning on moving anyway, because what had happened is that our kid had gotten into a school in South London, and so we were in North London, and that meant that, basically their commute was insane, and so we were already thinking, hey, maybe we should move to South London, this year after our lease expires, so that we can, have an easier time of it. And so this basically just kind of forced our hand a little bit, right? It was like, okay, yeah, you definitely have to move. We went, okay. So we started looking around for places, and we initially found one that we really liked, and we initially made an offer to rent. And, the landlord said, yeah, 100%, absolutely. We're going to take your deposit payment. Everything's great. Your reference checks have gone through. No problems whatsoever. And then it kind of got to like a week before the move, and we hadn't gotten the contract yet. And so we basically started bothering the lettings agents, and we said, hey, what's going on? We don't have the contract yet. And then they said, oh, we're so sorry. We're going to be doing some repainting of the house. The landlord just wants to make sure it's all nice for you. So it's going to have to be another week. And we said, okay, yeah, sure. And so then another week passes, and once again, we start going, okay, where's our contract? We've not gotten the contract yet. And at this point, we get a call from the lettings agents, and they say, oh, we're so sorry. Unfortunately, the owner has decided to sell instead of renting. And that means that, basically, you can't get this house. Which was very frustrating, because at this point we had been in a state of packing, preparing to move for several weeks. We had been hoping to move in mid-November, because that was basically a time where we were, basically going to be before the holidays. We wanted to get moved sooner so that we didn't have a ton of stress. And that was super fucking annoying. Probably not illegal or anything. I mean, I don't think the landlord really did anything wrong, but it happened. And so, okay, great. We have to do the whole thing again. So we did the whole thing again. We started looking around at places. We, made some offers. We found a place that we like infinitely more. So this truly was one of those things where I know that you always talk about how it's like, oh, when one opportunity falls, another one rises in its place. Truly, the house that we currently ended up in, this lovely new office that you see here, is significantly better than the place that we were going to rent, and it is roughly the same price. So the fact that we are in this new place actually did turn out to be a huge upgrade. However, it involved a lot more stress, because again, at this point, we had already packed a lot of our things. We had already disrupted a lot of our daily routines for what we had thought was going to be the first move, and then that got canceled. And we had to spend a bunch of time finding a new place, going through all that. And then finally, we got that all settled, and we finally moved into the new place. Early December was our move date, and it's done. Finally it's done. We had to expend a lot of money on the process, obviously. But on the plus side, now that we're here, we truly do love this place. It truly is a much better house than the place we were living, than the place we were theoretically going to live the first time. And so that's been lovely. But it has been the most draining, exhausting event of like the past 6 years plus, easy. I would say that in the past, we've done moves that were pretty mentally and physically taxing. This was, I would say, maybe a bit less mentally taxing because it did not have the same level of psychological stress that some of these moves tend to have. But it was extremely physically taxing, in part because in the past when we've moved, obviously we are Americans in the UK, we did not have as many possessions, right? We first moved to Denmark, we first moved to the UK. We did not have that many possessions, so it was relatively easy to move, even if it was very stressful. You know, sometimes it was like, okay, you had to get a little bit of furniture out of the way and then get some new furniture or whatever, but, you know, fine. In this case, we truly had been living in the same place, in the same house for 6 years. We had a lot more possessions that had accumulated over that time. We had a lot more furniture that obviously, some of which, you know, really suited the old place, but does not suit the new place at all. And so we had to get rid of a lot of furniture. We had to get a lot of new furniture. You know, we just had a lot of things that we had to do logistics around. And so it was extremely physically taxing, extremely physically draining, just get everything packed, you know, figuring out how it was all going to work, etc. And this new place, again, I cannot emphasize enough, is much better. It's roughly the same size as our old place, but it has much better use of space. It has better use of space such that everyone has their own space as much as they need. And we also have cool stuff like we have a garage that I'm able to set up a little home gym in. We have an outdoor workshop space that basically our youngest is able to use. And just, you know, everyone has their own rooms. A big issue that I had with filming, particularly over the past year with 2025, was simply having privacy to film. So depending on how, you know, where you were of my previous filming space, essentially what had happened was when we'd first moved to this prior house, this was in 2020. So when we first moved to the UK in 2018, we were in a tiny little flat. Again, we didn't have a lot of possessions at the time, so it was relatively workable, and the kids were younger, so, you know, they didn't need as much space, and that all worked out fine, right? But we were already sort of outgrowing that space, which is why we decided to do this move in 2020, where we found a much bigger place that was, you know, much better space for everybody. I should note also that we like literally moved in January of 2020. We obviously did not expect that COVID would happen. We obviously got very lucky that we managed this major move just before COVID started happening. I think we probably would have all killed each other if we had been in that silly little flat still for longer, you know, stuck in there during the pandemic. You know, we got very lucky, right? So we moved there in 2020. It was much bigger. It was mostly good for everybody. However, at the time that we moved, basically I was working from home. My wife was not. My wife was working from an office. And so at the time we had one spare space that could serve as my office. And we said, great, that would be perfect. Adam will get the office, and, you know, my wife would just go into her, you know, in office work. However, obviously the pandemic happened, right? And so at that point, she had to start working from home, and we didn't really have a dedicated office space that worked for her at all. And so this created a lot of problems. I should also note that at the time, the kids were sharing a bedroom, which they kind of outgrew. They grew to a point where, you know, they just weren't really capable of sharing a bedroom anymore. So essentially, at the end of the day, we ended up in a position where we kind of needed 2 more spaces than we really had. And we kind of had to make some, you know, some juggling, some, you know, concessions on that. And one of the concessions that we made is that I ended up giving up my office space to my wife, and I ended up taking basically half of the living room downstairs to serve as my office space. The problem with that was it has virtually no privacy. You know, all kinds of noise can come in, all kinds of interference, you know, the kids running around, you know, people doing stuff in the kitchen nearby. And so that made it really, really difficult to film. That made it difficult to concentrate on work sometimes because I was constantly being interrupted. I should also note that something else about that house is that it was a perfectly lovely house for London. It was very expensive rent-wise because we were in London itself. And it also was very old. So by very old, I mean like pre-World War II, survived the Blitz, got bombed. At some point in the 60s, they found unexploded ordnance in the basement and they had to call in the bomb disposal to take care of it. Like, that's the kind of old that we're talking about. And this house is so old, everything is made out of brick. It's not very well insulated. It is very drafty. It is hard to heat. There are a lot of mold issues. And another issue is that the Wi-Fi was terrible. Basically every wall would just absorb Wi-Fi signals. So trying to get Wi-Fi through the house was impossible. We had all kinds of stuff set up to extend our Wi-Fi network. And even then the signal was not good. On top of all of that, basically we ended up having to run wired cables throughout the house so that we could plug stuff in directly without having to, actually go through the Wi-Fi. And that got annoying and complicated. It meant that there were cables everywhere, wires everywhere all the time. So not really ideal for working stuff. So the new place is much more modern. It is much better insulated. It's much nicer just to live in. The heating is better. The Wi-Fi gets so easily through the whole house, and we have basically 3 times the speed that we used to get. So everything is better. And of course, again, we now also have our own work from home office spaces. Kids have their own spaces. Everyone has the space that they need. And that is genuinely like a huge load off of my mind. It is so refreshing. It is like, it's just insane how much of a night and day difference it is living in this place versus living in the old place. While it was this major disruption to our lives that really took like a month and a half plus to really start to get settled, we are finally settling down into place. Now, that said, what would you say is the best possible time to have a major health, not crisis, but a major health thing? Yeah, right after that move, obviously, right? That's exactly when you want to deal with a major health thing. So what happened was I went to Finland. So we had a quick holiday in Finland for a few days, basically immediately after we were done with the move in early December. And so we were gone in Finland for a few days, feeling fine, everything's fine. Had a nice holiday. And then we come back and I wake up one morning and my left foot is in extreme pain to walk on it. I initially thought maybe I had some kind of a stress fracture or something, but it was not healing up immediately. And so basically I then had to go to the doctor. Went to the doctor and the doctor said it could be gout or cellulitis or something like that. If it is gout is often caused by diet, and I will admit my diet has not been great for the past couple of months, again, just due to all the stuff we've been doing with the move. And so, I don't know, we're still figuring out what it is. It's not been resolved yet, but, basically that's also made it very difficult for me to work out because it makes it hard to do basically any kind of, exercise that's standing, any kind of loaded exercise. So between all of that, health issues, major moves, all kinds of stuff settling down, it's like changing over all your utilities, all the other stuff you have to manage with all of that. It's been a very stressful few months, and I have had 0 time to film. I mean, I haven't even had the ability to film for the most part. My computer that I use for editing, I use a separate device, and that's been packed up basically since early November, because again, that's when we started packing everything, thinking that we're going to be moving in mid-November. And so I've not had any time to do anything. And that sucks, right? It sucks because I've not been able to keep on top of fitness stuff. It sucks because I've not been able to keep on top of videos or anything else. As a result, I've been seeing that my client base for fitness coaching has gone down a bit because, a few people have canceled. But I'm alive, right? Other things that are sort of all, congealing at once. 2025 has been, I would say, a very busy year for me. It's basically been a year where my day job work has significantly expanded in scope. I've had to do a lot more work, and that has meant less time left over to focus on projects, less time to focus on stuff that I want to do. I play a lot of old school RuneScape. This is a thing that I've been somewhat clear about in the past. Maybe not. Maybe you didn't know that. I'm a big player of old school RuneScape, which is an MMO, a very grindy MMO where you click on things all day to get experience. And I started playing in 2020 because I discovered that it's kind of an ideal second monitor game. Just to say that it's a game where you can, put it on your other monitor. You can do a lot of AFK-ish activities where you don't have to interact with the game too often. And then basically you can play it while you're doing other stuff. You can play it while you're playing other video games. You can play it while you're working, etc. And so it is a game that is relatively low, mental effort. There's a lot of stuff that you can do in it that is very AFK, don't have to pay attention. There's, of course, also a lot of active stuff that you can do in the game as well, but, obviously I don't do that while I'm doing other stuff. And so I've been playing a lot of that in the past few years, and one of the main goals for a lot of people who play old school RuneScape is to max out your character, meaning that you have level 99 in all the skills, which is a difficult thing to do. It can typically take a few years for most people. And so 2025 is the year that I maxed my character in RuneScape. Congratulations to me. And then it is the year that I maxed my character in RuneScape again. Because what happened is that in mid-November, they released the new sailing skill, which is the first new skill that they've added to old school RuneScape since a very long time ago. I could really explain the whole thing, but I'm not going to, because explaining different versions of RuneScape is beyond the scope of this video, right? But sailing, right? Lovely new skill for RuneScape. And so obviously there was a race to see who would be the first person to get level 99 in sailing. Kind of the same way that in any MMO, there's like a new content drop and people, compete to see who's the first person who can complete it, or the first group of people. Well, I was obviously nowhere near at the top of the list. There was a guy who did it in like 1 week, who got like the first, world first. He basically, I guess, stayed up, with no sleep the entire time and just grinded the whole time. And his girlfriend kept bringing him caffeine every, a drip every couple hours or whatever. I was obviously not able to do anything like that. I had to use very AFK methods. Again, given everything else going on in November, December, as I've already explained. And so I was relatively slow about it. On the plus side, I did get to peak at like top 8,000 players or whatever when I finally maxed out. Which, I mean, top 8,000 doesn't sound like a very big number, but I mean, there's like hundreds of thousands, millions of people who've played this game, right? Like it's a relatively impressive number, which I'm pretty proud of, because again, all of this happened while I was primarily not playing or focusing on old school RuneScape. I was dealing with a move, dealing with all kinds of stuff at work, dealing with everything else going on in life. And so that's been, lovely. I enjoyed that. I've played a lot of RuneScape this year. I got like the old school RuneScape year in review, and they said that I have played basically like 12 hours a day on average for the year, which sounds like a lot, but again, let me remind you that mostly that's not a sign that I'm actually playing RuneScape. That is a sign that I'm actually doing something else, and I have RuneScape on the side monitor on the background. Basically, that's not really like, hey, you were playing a lot of RuneScape this year. It's actually more like, hey, you were working a lot this year, and you happen to have RuneScape on the side. So that's why it becomes very possible to have such big numbers, even though I'm not really actively playing the game that much. But it was the year that I maxed out my character, and then maxed out my character again after the new skill release, and I'm pretty happy about that. It was pretty fun. Genuinely one of my favorite games of all time, and I will keep playing it for probably another decade, so, they got me. Training-wise, it's been a kind of interesting year up and down. I've had some successes and some failures. So as I've talked about in another video, I had a really big issue this year where I started to really feel my age. Not in the sense that I'm not, generally very physically capable, still very active, still very healthy, etc., but in that I am starting to get to the point where I have been lifting for so many years, for so long, so intensely, that I'm starting to get not like burnt out, but I'm starting to reach a limit in terms of just what I can accomplish, or in terms of what I'm really willing to keep pushing for. And for those who don't know, I primarily have trained as a powerlifter for many years, meaning that really what I care about is being as strong as possible in the squat, bench press, and deadlift. And I got to a point where essentially I'd been stagnant for a few years, probably due to COVID and shifting training priorities and whatnot. And then I did some really aesthetic, physique-focused stuff for a little while. And then I regained the weight and I really wanted to make a big push for the strength. Well, I did that and I was seeing some initial, success. I was seeing my bench moving for the first time in years. My bench has always been the slowest to move. I was seeing my squat grow incredibly. Like my squat went from like 400 to 500 plus. It's always been my weakest lift. And I saw my deadlift go from like 550 to like a little over 600. All really good stuff for somebody who's been lifting for basically 20 years at this point. Really able to make some, lock in and make some impressive gains. That happened a lot in like 2024, early 2025. Then in like mid 2025, I just had something happened. Like, I don't know what it was. I just kind of like woke up one day and everything started sucking. And that was essentially that I would still see my squat increasing pretty regularly. It was still going pretty strong. But basically, my bench press was not really moving. My deadlift was like losing pounds every week. Like I was genuinely just watching my numbers, go down for a period of about a month and a half. And I had no idea why. And my body was feeling beat up all the time. My back was just killing me in a way that it never really has before. And I didn't really know what to do about that. What I really said to myself was, okay, like, I'm getting older, 35, not the worst age in the world, not the best either. And I said, well, maybe I need to not be so intense about this. Maybe I just need to pull back and be realistic about my possibilities for the future, right? And I basically decided, okay, I'm going to be less aggressive about train a little bit less frequently. I am going to refocus my efforts because as much as I liked my squat going up, my squat was not really a lift that I ever cared about because I've always been so bad at it. So I've always thought, why continue to throw a lot of effort after it if it's not really a lift that I like? So I said, okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to really focus on the bench deadlift, and I'm going to start shifting a bit more to the physique stuff again. So that's what I did. However, what I realized when I did that was that actually the issue was not particularly that I was doing anything wrong, but it was that I was just giving my body too much. I was genuinely just trying to do too much at once. And that is because squatting for me has always been very harsh on my body. I've had multiple knee issues over the years. I've never had a back issue from deadlifting ever. I have had multiple issues from squatting. I have found that it takes me a lot longer to recover from a heavy squat than it does from a heavy deadlift. I can do a heavy deadlift and I can probably deadlift, maybe not heavy, but reasonably heavy the next day and I'll feel fine. It'll suck, but I'll feel fine. Whereas if I do a heavy squat, it may just completely knock out my legs and my back for days. And so I had initially tried like, okay, I'm going to make it longer and longer. I'm going to do it so that I'm, instead of squatting and deadlifting heavy once a week, I'll like stretch it out. So it's more like once every 9 days, once every 10, 11, 12 days. It wasn't until I got to the point where I was doing it every other week, which is to say, I squat heavy one week, deadlift heavy the next week and repeat, that it really started to work. And that is not something I wanted to do because for me, again, I didn't want to have to compromise my continued growth in the deadlift that much just to be able to also see my strength continue to increase in the squat. So what I ended up doing is just cutting out squatting entirely and deadlifting every week. And I still squat, obviously. I squat much, much lighter. I'm doing like lighter pause squats and things like that. I'm not doing like heavy squats. And what I saw was really incredible. I saw my recovery just immediately improve. This issue where my back had been killing me for months just went away. This issue where my deadlift had been going downhill for months just went away. And suddenly I started seeing strength increases again. So mid-2025, this is when I made that change. And I just started seeing, oh my God, things are moving again. And so at this point, my deadlift quickly got back up to where I was before, and it started to increase further. So it was, I would say, around like 615, 620 estimated when I ended up having to stop training. So I was seeing incredible results for that. And again, bench continuing to increase as well. So it was a mixed year. I had to make a lot of compromises, a lot of changes, but I'm pretty happy with where it ended up. Basically, I kept training all the way up to the move as much as I could. So I was training up until about start of December. And basically, since then, I've not really been able to train that much. So obviously, we moved in early December. I did not get my workout equipment to the new place for the garage gym that I'm assembling until, like a week later. So then, and then I needed to get some tools, which I realized I didn't have for tightening the bolts and whatnot on the squat rack. And so, okay, I needed to, wait some longer to get some tools. And then once all that got sorted out, I started, trying out, and it was like, awesome, great. I could work out at home. I have a squat rack at home. That's great. Lovely. Awesome. And that led right directly into the issue that I have now, where I have the issue with my foot and whatever it is, whether it's gout or cellulitis or something like that. So that's kind of sucked, because basically it's when I haven't really been able to train much at all for the entirety of December. I've also lost a lot of weight, to be very clear. I wasn't able to eat as well for the entirety of like November, December. My diet quality went down. I had to rely a lot more on just like junk food, fast food stuff. And on top of that, I just wasn't able to eat that much because I just didn't have time. Again, I was like on my feet all day for weeks preparing for the move. And so just when did I have time to eat? Like none. Like the day of the move, I think I basically didn't eat anything all day. Stuff like that. And so I've lost like 6-7 kilos, like 15 pounds, which I will have to obviously put back on. I wasn't able to get my step count in. I had a step count streak for like 4 years straight, 10,000 steps a day, every single day. I had to break that for this because I just didn't have time to think about it. Same thing with tracking my macros. I had like a 3-4 year streak on tracking my macros every single day. I had to break that as well, just because I didn't have time to track anything. And so January is really the time where I'm going to be getting back into it, right? It's when I'm going to be refocusing all of my habits, getting back into all the things that I was used to doing. Obviously, once I'm able to figure out my foot issue, get back into doing 10,000 steps a day, get back into exercising regularly, get back into obviously doing videos, get back into doing content and stuff like that. And also just getting back into focusing on my clients and my coaching business. It's also been something where, not to say too much about day job stuff, but day job wise, January is a very big month for us just because we have a new product launching. And so that means that I have to spend a lot more time focusing on stuff for my day job as well. So it's been very, very busy. I mean, even the holidays have actually been busy. In past years, historically, it's been pretty light over the holidays, but just because we have this product launching in January, it means that I have to do a lot more work. And so I've really not even really been able to properly take a Christmas, New Year's holiday because I've just continued to need to work this whole time. Is what it is. So yeah, it's been a very eventful couple of months, and I've just been so crazy busy that it's like I just fell into a black hole. It's just like time passed in like 5 minutes. Like I've gone insane. There's nothing, it's just it's gone. And I mean, do I have New Year's resolutions for 2026? I don't know. 2025 was a mixed bag of a year. Very busy year. Some great things, some not so great things. 2026, I really don't see as much different. But I do see that because we've moved, because we're in this new place, and because this new place gives us a lot more opportunities, it really takes a lot of potential issues out of our, things that we have to deal with. I do foresee that 2026 will be better. I'll be able to be more productive. I'll be able to be more focused. I'll be able to be more locked in on just all the stuff that needs to be done, on making videos, on, just communicating with you folks. But I don't necessarily have resolutions this time around. I don't necessarily have plans. I think I'm gonna, just let the universe give to me whatever it says that I deserve. I will continue to work as hard as possible, as I do every single year. But we'll just let 2026 decide what it's going to be, happening this year. So I hope that this has been, I don't know, somewhat of interest to you. Anyone who's been wondering where I've been, I'm so sorry I've not been able to make videos. I'll be changing that immediately. It'll be so much easier to make videos now that I have this dedicated office space. And so, awesome, great. I'll have more videos for you coming up. Hopefully you've all had a good year. Hopefully you are all succeeding on your New Year's resolutions already on this day, January 1st, the time that I'm filming. And, I wish you all the best. As always, don't hesitate to like, comment, subscribe, smash the notification bell, comment down below. Make fun of my hair. Tell me that I am a wuss for not being able to make videos while I was moving or whatever. Love you all. Have a good one.